Bruce Lee died 37 days before Enter the Dragon opened. He was 32 years old. Brandon Lee died 44 days before The Crow opened. He was 28. Father and son. Different cities, different films, different decades, different causes of death. The same distance between the end and the moment the world would have seen what they had built. Brandon knew this parallel existed. He had grown up inside it. He had said 1 year before he died that he firmly believed his father would not have wanted his life to be a problem for his son. He was trying to step out of the shadow. 8 days from the end, the shadow found him. This is the story of Brandon Lee, not the legend, not the parallel, not the curse, the man. Brandon Bruce Lee was born on February 1, 1965, in Oakland, California. He was 8 years old when his father died. 8 years old is old enough to remember. It is old enough to understand that the person who was there is no longer there, and to begin the long process of working out what that means for who you are going to be. Bruce Lee died on July 20, 1973. Enter the Dragon opened on August 19, 1973. Brandon was 8 years old, and his father was suddenly not just gone, but enormous, a cultural force, a global icon, a face on posters in cities where neither of them had ever been. Growing up in that shadow was not simple. Brandon said so directly and repeatedly in the interviews he gave in the years before his death. He was not bitter about it. He was clear-eyed about it. He understood that the name he carried was both a gift and a weight, that it opened doors that would have been closed to an unknown actor, and that it also meant that every role he played, every interview he gave, every performance he delivered would be evaluated in comparison to a standard that no living person could meet because the standard was no longer living. He chose acting anyway, not martial arts first, as his father had done. Bruce Lee used to say he was a martial artist first and an actor second, and Brandon said the opposite. He was an actor who happened to have inherited extraordinary physical ability, and he was determined to develop the craft on its own terms, rather than as a delivery system for the family name. He studied seriously and in multiple contexts at the Lee Strasberg Theater and Film Institute in New York, with acting coach Eric Morris in Los Angeles, at Emerson College in Massachusetts, where he majored in theater. He was not coasting on a famous name. He was building something of his own, deliberately and with the specific patience of someone who understands that the shortcut is also the trap. He was also, in parallel, building himself as a person distinct from his father. He had strong opinions. He was funny, genuinely funny in the spontaneous way that cannot be manufactured, not the studied charm of someone who has learned to perform warmth, but the real thing. He was expelled from his senior year of high school for staging a rebellion in which he encouraged his classmates not to take their studies seriously, and then received his diploma at Miralest High School, which suggests a school administration with more flexibility than most. He held down a burglar who broke into his home and waited calmly for the police to arrive, as if this were an entirely unremarkable way to handle the situation. He fell for Eliza Hutton at a production company Christmas party, charmed her with what she later described as faux arrogance, deliberate, funny, a test of whether she would laugh at him, and took her to a Melissa Etheridge concert on one of their first dates. He loved animals. He was a voracious reader. He was, by the consistent testimony of the people who knew him, a complete human being who happened to have an incomplete last name to live up to.
The martial arts training was there from the beginning. It had to be, given who his father was and what his father had left behind. Dan Inosanto, one of Bruce Lee's most devoted students and one of only 3 people Bruce had certified as a full instructor of Jeet Kune Do, took Brandon under his instruction after Bruce's death. Inosanto had been one of Bruce's closest friends and collaborators. He had appeared in Game of Death, had trained alongside Bruce at the height of his development of Jeet Kune Do, and had continued teaching and developing the system after Bruce died. Training Brandon was not a formal obligation. It was something he chose to do for the son of a man he had loved. The specific request was kept quiet. At the Kali Institute, where Inosanto taught, the fact that the boy taking children's classes was Bruce Lee's son was not advertised. Brandon trained as a student among students, without the weight of the name attaching to every session. Bob Wall, the actor and martial artist who had appeared in Enter the Dragon and who had been part of Bruce's extended circle, watched the young Brandon and noted that he hit with genuine power and had good footwork, not inherited celebrity, but actual ability developed through years of real work. Jeff Imada, who would go on to choreograph The Crow, had known Brandon since these early years and had watched him grow from a boy into a martial artist who could hold his own entirely on his own merits. None of them could be his father, but they could be what they were, the people his father had trained with, fought with, argued with, laughed with, and in being those people, they gave Brandon something irreplaceable, a connection to the world his father had moved through, handed down not through blood, but through practice. The career built slowly. Legacy of Rage in 1986, a Hong Kong action film that earned him a Hong Kong Film Award nomination. Showdown in Little Tokyo in 1991. Rapid Fire in 1992, which was his best work to that point, a film that showed his range and his physical ability and suggested that what was coming next might be substantial. He turned down the lead role in Dragon, the Bruce Lee story, the 1993 biopic about his father. This decision has been discussed at length in the years since. Some saw it as avoidance. Brandon saw it differently. He had said that he firmly believed his father would not have wanted his life to be a problem to him. Playing his father on screen, in a film about his father's life, at this specific point in his own career, was not something he was willing to do. He was trying to be Brandon Lee, not Bruce Lee's son playing Bruce Lee. The Crow was the film he chose instead. Based on James O'Barr's dark graphic novel, itself written as O'Barr's processing of his own grief after his fiancée was killed by a drunk driver, it told the story of Eric Draven, a musician murdered alongside his fiancée, who is resurrected by a supernatural crow to exact revenge on the gang responsible. The character wore black. The character wore white face paint. The character was defined entirely by love, loss, and the impossibility of letting go. It was, by any careful reading, a remarkable role for Brandon Lee to have accepted, a story about a man who dies and comes back, played by the son of a man who died and became immortal, in a film that would not be released until after the actor himself was gone. Well-established actors, including River Phoenix and Christian Slater, had been considered for the lead. Director Alex Proyas chose Brandon because he wanted someone who could move with genuine physical authority and simultaneously carry the emotional weight of a character defined by grief. Brandon had both. He understood loss in a way that was not academic. He had lost his father at 8 years old and spent 20 years working out what that meant. He dieted down to a leaner frame to match the lanky, angular quality of O'Barr's character. He trained for the physical sequences. He brought Jeff Imada in for the fight choreography. Imada, who had known Brandon since childhood, who had watched him grow up in the dojo, who understood his capabilities better than almost anyone. He committed to the project with the specific intensity of someone who understood that this was the film that could change everything, the role that would establish him as something other than a famous man's son, something of his own.
On March 31, 1993, he was filming a night scene in a warehouse space in Wilmington, North Carolina. The scene required his character, Eric Draven, to walk into his apartment, discover his fiancée being attacked by a gang of thugs, and be shot by one of them as he enters the room. Actor Michael Massey was playing the thug with the gun.
The gun being used was a real revolver, a Smith & Wesson Model 629, chambered in .44 Magnum, loaded with blank rounds for the scene. Blank rounds contain a powder charge and primer, but no solid bullet, which allows a gun to be fired with sound and flash effects without the risk of an actual projectile. This is standard film industry practice. It is safe when the gun is in the condition it is supposed to be in. The gun was not in the condition it was supposed to be in. Earlier in the production, the same revolver had been used for a close-up shot, requiring it to be loaded with dummy rounds, inert cartridges designed to look real for the camera. The dummy rounds had been improvised by the special effects crew from live cartridges that had the powder charges removed. During this improvisation, one of the bullets had separated from its casing and lodged in the barrel of the gun. Nobody noticed. The gun was not properly inspected before the night shoot. The weapons coordinator, the person whose specific professional responsibility was to ensure that every firearm on set was safe for use, had been sent home early that evening. Nobody was assigned to check the barrel. When Michael Massey fired the blank cartridge at Brandon Lee from a distance of roughly 4 meters, the powder charge expelled the lodged bullet fragment from the barrel with the force of a real shot. It struck Brandon in the abdomen and lodged near his spine. The crew noticed something was wrong when he was slow to get up. He was rushed to Hanover Regional Medical Center. Surgeons worked for 5 hours attempting to save his life. Brandon Lee was pronounced dead at 1:04 p.m. on April 1, 1993. There were 8 days left in the shoot. He had 3 more scenes to film. His wedding to Eliza Hutton was scheduled on April 17, 1993, 17 days away. The Crow was scheduled to open on May 13, 1994, 44 days after his death.
His father had been 37 days from Enter the Dragon's opening when he died. Brandon was 44 days from The Crow's opening when he died. The parallel is not mystical. It is not evidence of a curse, whatever the tabloids and the conspiracy websites have said across 3 decades. It is 2 men from the same family who both died young, one from a cerebral reaction to a painkiller, one from an industrial accident on a film set, both while their careers were at the point of transformation, both within weeks of the moment the world would have seen what they had built. The parallel exists because the facts are what they are, and the facts are what make it so difficult to read this story without feeling something that does not have a clean name. Dragon, the Bruce Lee story, the biopic Brandon had refused to appear in, opened on May 7, 1993, 37 days after Brandon's death. The film was dedicated to him. The closing title card used words that Bruce Lee had written in his notebooks years before his own death. The key to immortality is first living a life worth remembering. These same words are carved into Brandon's grave marker at Lakeview Cemetery in Seattle, where he was buried beside his father. Bruce Lee, age 32. Brandon Lee, age 28. The same cemetery, the same inscription, the son buried next to the father he had spent his adult life trying to step away from, not out of resentment, but out of the entirely reasonable desire to be known as himself. The Crow was completed with stunt doubles and digital face replacement and released on May 13, 1994. It was a critical and commercial success. Roger Ebert called it not only Brandon's best film, but better than any of his father's, a statement that would have meant something to Brandon, who had spent years insisting he was his own person. The film has become a cult classic. Brandon Lee had, in his final and incomplete performance, done precisely what he set out to do. He had stepped out of the shadow. He just hadn't been there to see it happen. He never knew. He was not there for the opening, he was not there for the reviews, he was not there for the April 17th wedding that Eliza Hutton had been planning, and he was not there for the child he had told people he hoped to have someday, the child he had imagined being a benefit to, rather than a burden.
Shannon Lee, his sister, said after his death that Brandon's legacy was about not wasting life and time, about following your heart. She said his fearlessness, his sense of adventure, his artistry and creativity, his desire for learning, all of it came from the time he had spent with their father before Bruce died. 8 years. He had 8 years with Bruce Lee, and then Bruce Lee's friends and students and disciples had given him the rest. Bruce Lee once wrote, "The key to immortality is first living a life worth remembering." He wrote it as philosophy. It became his son's epitaph. And then it became the title card at the end of a film about a dead man who came back to finish what he started. A film that opened without the man who made it 44 days after he died in the same city where his father was buried. If this story moved you, subscribe and leave a comment. Did you know how close Brandon was to finishing The Crow and how close the numbers are between father and son? Share this video with someone who knows the legend but not the man, because Brandon Lee was not a footnote in his father's story. He was writing his own, and he almost finished it.